tell me what happened then when you did get captured, and where were you taken, and how long were you in captivity for?
Well, it was quite obvious as the day wore on that the Afghan villagers wanted me out. And so we left. But by the time we got back to the border, Musharraf had sealed off the border, so nothing was getting in or out of Afghanistan or into Pakistan. And the guide said we'll stay overnight because it was starting to get dark, and the next day we'll go over a smuggling route. And I thought, oh, that sounds exciting, and if I do manage to get out, at least I'll be able to put this into the story and add some color about how brave and daring I was going through this smuggling route. And so I was quite happy about that. And the next day we went off on this alternative route. And I thought, so I'm on the smuggling route, yes, and I thought that the area would be deserted and we would be running from tree to tree and ducking and diving, but it wasn't like that at all. It was milling with hundreds of people, lots of Afghan families going one way with their hand carts and all their worldly goods, dragging them towards Pakistan to escape the bombing that they knew was coming. And from the Pakistan side, there were young men striding over from the border saying, you know, we've come to join the Taliban to fight the great Satan, as they referred to America. So there was lots of comings and goings, people selling coffees and teas. I saw some camels. And by this time, the Afghan shoes I was wearing were beginning to cut into my feet. And I started complaining to the guide, saying I can't go much further. And they said, can you ride a donkey? And they took me over to this string of miserable looking donkeys. And I looked at them and just sort of sneered and said, of course I can ride a donkey. I can ride horses. I can jump. I can race. I said, you know, look at these. Of course I can ride a donkey. Same shape, same size, you know, just we'll get a donkey. So we bought a donkey. I don't know what the deal was because I certainly wasn't going to take it back. But I got on this donkey and I'm adjusting myself in the saddle and the animal just bolted. And it just went herring off at a great rate of knots. And the wind was flapping in the folds of my burqa and they were snapping, and that made the animal run even faster. And I'm trying to lean forward to get hold of the reins to try and pull this beast under control. And as I leant forward, the one piece of equipment that I'd taken into Afghanistan was my camera. And that fell out of the folds of my burqa. And it was right in the view of a passing Taliban soldier. And I don't know how coordinated this was, but the donkey stopped at the feet of the Taliban soldier and threw me off. I don't know if he had grabbed the reins. I just don't know how it happened, but I went up into the air and then tumbled back down. And as I pulled myself up, I'm looking through the grill of the burqa, and this man is shouting at me, and it's obvious he wants the camera. So I took the camera and handed it to him. And then I stood back and closed my eyes because I thought he's going to shoot me now. You know, this is what the most evil, brutal regime in the world will do. And so I had my eyes closed, and I had them closed for about 10
Yeah.
seconds, which is quite a long time when you're waiting to be shot. And when I opened them again, he'd gone. He'd gone over to the donkey trader. He wanted to find who's in charge of this woman. Then he would find out who was
Yeah.
responsible for the camera. So I just thought, my goodness, I can get away. He doesn't realize I'm a Westerner. So I looked around, and there was a group came towards me with 3 women wearing burqas. And I thought, I'm just going to join this group. And so I attached myself to the end of this group, and I just thought, what's one more burqa? Nobody's going to take any notice. And so I just joined them. And, they say you should never look back, but I did. And when I looked back, I saw my 2 guides were surrounded by about 30 angry men, all jostling and pushing. And the Taliban soldier was in the middle, and he had the camera in his hands, and he's shouting and he's waving the camera. And I just thought, oh gosh, they're in serious trouble. And then I reasoned, well, we agreed in the event of anything going pear-shaped, we would go our separate ways, and it would be each man, woman for themselves. And so I just continued walking with this group. And then I looked around again, and by this time, there was a huge crowd gathering around the men, and I just thought, I can't leave them. How can I write my story and say at the end, oh, and by the way, I abandoned my 2 guides. So
you were
cursing
almost out.
myself,
You just kept going.
I turned round. I should have kept going, but anyway, I couldn't, because I realized that if they had if they had developed the camera, they would have seen the pictures, and they would have realized, a lot more than, and so it would have exposed the villagers in this little village called Karma. And so I went back, and I'm cursing myself under my breath, saying, you shouldn't be doing this. And I had 2 voices in my head. Yes, you should. You've got to do the right thing. And another voice saying, no, just turn around and run. You'll get away, and you'll still get your story. And so I'm wrestling with my conscience as I walk towards them. And then I tried to push my way through this crowd, and they just looked and swatted me away. This was man's business, nothing to do with women. So I went back in again to try and get through. And again, I was thrown aside. And by this time, the red mist had descended, and I'd been knocked to the ground. So I jumped up, pulled off my burqa. I was wearing a shalwar kameez. And as I say, I pulled off my burqa, and I said, will somebody let me through? And suddenly everything froze. Everybody stopped. And then they parted, and it was like the parting of the sea. And I walked through straight to the Taliban soldier, who was looking gobsmacked, thinking, where the hell has she come from? What is she in all of this? And I snuck a quick look at my guides, thinking that they would be looking back at me going, oh, how brave, how noble. And I looked at them, and they looked at me as if to say, we were in trouble before, but now we're in serious trouble. And so as I'm walking towards this soldier, I just thought, oh no, this is the worst thing that I could have done.
Oh no.
I would have been better off
Oh no.
walking to freedom. So the three of us were grabbed, taken into a car and driven off at speed back towards Jalalabad. And one of the two guides who spoke English sort of whispered to me, "Don't say anything." And I just said, "I won't, I don't know you, and we'll keep it going." And at this point, the driver and the soldier were having this heated argument, and they kept looking back at me and shouting at each other. And in the end, the driver did an emergency stop, and the soldier got out and went around to my side, opened the door, and sort of pointed his gun and wanted me out of the car. And I just thought, oh, this is it. I'm going to be shot. So I got out of the car, and he pointed for me to stand on this mound. So I stood on this mound, this little hill. And then he went over another hill and disappeared out of sight. And I just thought, what's going on here? And I thought I could make a run for it, but I've never been a sprinter. And I just thought I'd get caught straight away. So I'm standing on this mound and I'm looking round, and the place was absolutely deserted. And as I'm looking around, I'm seeing rocks and stones and pebbles on the ground, and my blood red nail varnish shining back at me. And I don't know what had happened, but in this melee, I'd lost my Afghan shoes. And I just thought, oh gosh, nail varnish is banned under the Taliban. And if they see my red nails, they'll chop my toes off one by one. So I'm trying to dig in my feet into the dust to hide this nail varnish. And then I looked up, and from a deserted area, it was suddenly full of people. And I don't know where they came from because they weren't on the horizon. But there was about 30, 40 angry looking men in front of me. And they were staring at me really angry, and they were coming forward step by step, getting closer and closer. And I just thought, oh gosh, this is the stoning corner. That's what all these rocks and pebbles are doing around here. Any minute now, I'm going to be stoned to death. And I'm looking round for a kind face, somebody who will be my champion and stop the stoning. But they all looked so angry.
Or were they looking at the other people in the taxi?
Then I remembered, as a Sunday school teacher, teaching the children about how Jesus saved a woman and stopped her from being stoned. And he had shouted to the crowd, "Let him without sin cast the first stone." And I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. So I thought, I'm just going to shout out, "Let him without sin cast the first stone."
This is so funny.
Obviously, I wasn't thinking straight because nobody spoke English. And there were three very old, pious-looking men at the back with big, long, white beards. And I looked at them and I just thought, oh, no, I'm not going to say that, because they'll say that's us and they'll start the stoning straight away. Just then, the Taliban soldier came over the hill again, not with a crowd. I thought he must have gone off, saying, quick, we've got a Westerner, we're going to have a stoning in 10 minutes' time. But he came back not with a crowd, but with a woman wearing a burqa. And she marched down to me and turned me round and started frisking me. So I had my back to all the men behind me. And I just thought, oh, thank goodness I'm not going to be killed. Well, not immediately. They think I'm carrying weapons or something. And this is why she's frisking me. And suddenly I just felt so angry that those men behind me had made me feel so scared and terrified that I pulled away from the woman and I swung round to the men and I picked the hem of my dress from the shalwar kameez and I pulled it up and said, look, I'm not carrying any weapons.
Did they all?
And the men collectively gasped, ah, and slowly turned round and then ran as though the devil
So
was
that's what you should have done to
biting
start
their
with.
heels. The woman wearing the burqa swung me round and slapped me over the face. She was so shocked at this vulgar display. And of course, as I say, it was a clash of cultures. I was wearing trousers, you know, I wasn't showing anything. I just lifted up the skirt and said, I'm not carrying any weapons. And it makes me laugh when I look back now. But, you know, I said when I'd met General Gull, I had absolutely no cultural awareness at all.